The Photowalk is a Loading Zone production.
I'm just about to go and drive to Old Bristol to go and see today's guest. No Barney today. It's going to be very unusual. The last couple of weeks in particular, maybe 3. How many weeks is it now where Barney's been a bit of a star? 2 weeks, is it? No Barney today though. But I have here, I don't have a postcode, but from Bill. Hi Neil, got an email. Let's say Greyfield Woods, 11 o'clock. What 3 words? Belong, reap, ambushed. I have no idea. I mean, I know what 3 words are, but I've no idea how that translates into finding a postcode. But belong, reap, ambushed. It sounds a bit sinister, doesn't it? I've been watching The Purge of late, which I know, Neil, that's not like you. Well, it's not really, no. But it feels a little bit like something out of The Purge. Belong, reap, ambushed. Anyway, camera bag. What have we got? I need to make sure I've got a spare microphone fluffy or dead cat. I've got the X100V spare batteries up in there. And that's it, really. I'm travelling light for today's special guest interview on the Photowalk. I'm walking with Bill Ward, who is an actor and a very fine photographer.
Today on the Photowalk.
You know, I've done long-running shows up to a year, and that's what keeps a show fresh, is you're just listening very clearly and very carefully to whatever the other person is saying to you and how they're saying it, and then you're responding. And for me, photography is absolutely about that thing, is listening very carefully to whatever Mother Nature happens to be saying on any given day, at any given time, and responding accordingly. And ICM is a really pure version of that for me.
Stories of life told by photographers, and today I'm walking for a Photowalk special with TV, stage and film actor, photographer and mentor Bill Ward. And the mailbag I usually carry receives a week, I suppose, to replenish, and instead you and I get to walk with Bill, who as an actor has appeared in over 30 TV shows and film titles and over 50 different play titles since turning professional over 2 decades ago. He's appeared in the big 3, as I suppose you can call it in the UK, the soaps that is, best known for playing the badly behaved builder Charlie Stubbs in Coronation Street, a role he played for over 400 episodes and 3.5 years, and for which he won award after award after award. As a photographer, he's been making pictures since he was in single digits in terms of years. To quote his website, Bill is constantly in search of peace and quiet. His photography is a response, and in many ways, an antidote to the time that he spends as an actor working in the public eye. We're walking together today thanks to our extra milers, thank you, and those special people at mpb.com, the website to go to when you're buying and selling and trading used camera kit if you're in the UK, the US or Europe. This weekend, and I genuinely mean this, we are clearing out the cupboard. It's Spring Clean in the Winter Part 2, where I'm having a good look through the lens cabinet. So I shall be selling some bits and bobs to mpb.com. Who knows? I might be buying 2. So whatever you shoot, wherever you make your pictures, whether that's on the street or the mountains, the sea, social photography, news, sport, macro, or pertinently, perhaps you photograph stage productions, professionally or for pleasure, and you want to treat that kit bag to something new to you, then go to mpb.com, because the prices are competitive, you get a guarantee when you buy a quality used kit from them, and you'll be buying responsibly and sustainably because you're part of the circular economy. I'll link to mpb.com on the show page today as well. So, lots to talk about today. Shall we walk then? Checklist out. Coffee and Garibaldi's packed. Check. Boots on and laced. Check. Spare batteries. Check. Geolocation app activated if you're map logging your pictures. Check. That sounds a bit What 3 Words. Phone, so you can actually use the What 3 Words app to make sure we both meet up with Bill. Check. Memory cards or spare film, check. Earbuds in, check. Lens caps off. Let's walk. Bill, you have the... I don't know if it's an honour. It's an odd honour, considering all the honours you've had in your life. But you have the honour of actually making me use What 3 Words for the first time to navigate and find something. What 3 words?
Yeah.
How that's let me use 3 words. Opened my mind.
It's a thing of genius, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, what a brand new, sparkling invention it is. Although I'm not sure how brand new and sparkling it is, but what an invention it is. It's a brilliant
But
thing.
you say they use it in acting all the time.
Yes, for locations, for if you're on set in various different places around the country, they send it out as part of the call sheet for the next day for all the techies and the crew to get to where they need to be, and also for the actors if they're making their own way there. So yeah.
Well, I'm going to use 3 more words. We'll start with What 3 Words. Why this place?
Because it's quiet, and I suspect we might do some talking. and it's a good quiet place to do that. It's a nice walk through just the Somerset countryside, really. It's about sort of half an hour from Bristol, and I come here with my other half, our kids, cousins, and we sort of muck about in the woods, have birthday parties here and all of that kind of a thing. But I've also come here quite a bit with a camera, because it's a bit like a TARDIS in here. It's not a particularly big wood, but it's got all sorts of interesting little nooks and crannies, and importantly for me, it's got a stream at the bottom, which every now and again bursts into a bit of a waterfall if there's enough water in the stream. And it's not a big waterfall, it's like 2 or 3 meters high, but it's fascinating in its own way, and I often kind of come here with my camera and just make something of it for an afternoon. It's a nice kind of relaxing place to be. I really enjoy it here.
I thought for a moment you were going to say it has a stream, and this is where I choose to do my what is very popular these days, wild water swimming. Because you did go on you spoke at it was not a conference, it was, what was it called, a festival.
Yeah.
A friend of ours on the show, Margaret Soraya, who was hosting the festival, and you spoke at it, and they did wild water swimming. Did you partake?
I didn't. I very happily arrived too late for that particular joy. But yeah, goodness me, absolutely. That's so not my thing, wild swimming. But my other half's done a fair bit of that. Yeah, it's good stuff.
How was this festival? What did you find?
It was just brilliant. I've never been on anything like that before, and it was sort of 3 days of positivity in a photographic sense. There was all sorts of... It was just really... Margaret had just thought about it really hard, and it was really well organised, and there were sort of workshops in the mornings and then various talks in the afternoons, and sort of a bit of wild swimming, and but all sorts of interesting kind of activities in terms of book binding, journal making, cyanotypes. I found it, and we were talking about this earlier, I found it, and it's an overused word, inspirational, but truly inspirational. I really found it truly inspirational. The positivity around both the speakers and the group was just wonderful, and it's one of those kind of events where you come away flying. It was. I absolutely loved it.
Now you run photography workshops. Has it changed the way that that you may run some of these yourself?
That's such a good question. The last couple of days, because I run workshops on creative photography, intentional camera movement, multiple exposures, abstracts, and I also run sort of workshops on seascapes. I have a thing about water. I'm a specialist water shooter, really. Yes, it has changed how I run those. I've just run a couple of recently. I was out yesterday on the coast of South Wales, and actually I was here 4 days ago running a workshop around a number of one-to-ones, and just in terms of taking time and tuning in to your surroundings. And there are a number of the speakers, Paul Sanders in particular, was very big on that. And I just think it's a really good way in. I've always sort of thought that time is far more important than place in terms of photography, because it's simply about the quality of the time for me that you spend with wherever it is that you happen to be, and the quality of the time that you spend somewhere is what gives you the opportunity to notice stuff. And so I've certainly sort of spent the last couple of workshops that I've been doing sort of just spending a bit more time slowing down at the start. And just getting at one with your surroundings, really, because I think that helps as a nice intro to the day. So yeah, it's been good fun.
Are all your workshops environmental, as in out and about?
Yes, I mean, I get asked to do. I did my first portfolio review actually the other day, which is quite interesting, which is not something I'd ever done before. But I was asked to do it, so I helped, and well, I hope I helped.
I've got their number here. Let's just. I've never done this before. We've done what 3 words? Let's do a live link up as well. There's another 3 words.
But I generally, yes, outdoors. I just hanging out with Mother Nature, really, and in all weathers. I mean, it's obviously sort of more pleasant to be out and about when it's on a day like this and it's not too windy and all of that. But you know, when Mother Nature's blowing a hoolie, that can be a pretty exciting photographic territory, really. So
even in the rain?
Yeah, I have done a couple. I've been out in a named storm before with Light and Land, which was wet, but doable. And the storm passed through just after lunch. And as often happens when storms pass through, you're left with this lovely kind of calm after the storm afterwards, and that's beautiful photographic territory. So if it's doable, I'll be out in it.
What are these? I see these in woods all the time. These sort of structures, that wigwammy structures that people make.
I've no idea.
I thought
I can't help you there at all. I see them. You see,
at least make something up.
Yes, exactly. I see them a lot around Bristol. Some of the kids build them in kind of woodcraft, kind of thing, and they're sort of dwellings, aren't they? Little sort of wigwammy, sheltery kind of things.
I'm not sure how much of a dwelling it is. It's a bit airy, isn't it? Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
The estate agent coming round, plenty of windows.
Yeah, it's kind of parky, isn't it? Yeah, that's for sure.
So let's talk about, I do want to talk about acting, clearly, but let's talk about your photography. I think, is it right that photography started before the acting? Because you started making pictures very early. I don't know how serious you were.
Well, I had a Kodak Instamatic.
Well, that's reasonably serious.
Isn't that as serious as it got at the time?
So many photographers that I've spoken to that have got illustrious careers started with a camera like that.
Yeah, it was a genius camera, wasn't it? It kind of had a bit where the lens was. Yeah. That's what the camera saw and the film saw, and there was the eye bit where you kind of look through, and the two things never quite ended up matching up in my experience. They were great fun. I started with one of those when I was about 7, and sort of took pictures of all sorts of things, really. You know, dogs and cats, cars. I took a lot of pictures of cars. Me and my brother used to ride around our bit of Newcastle, sort of finding people who had really expensive cars and then taking pictures of them. But I also took it on holiday whenever we went away. And I sort of took landscape pictures, but water pictures in particular. We used to go to, I mean, obviously I'm from Newcastle, and we used to go to the Northumbrian coast often.
Oh, it's rugged there, isn't it?
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And that's still very much home for me. And I do love it there. It's just wild, and it still hasn't changed much in sort of 50 years. And the secret got out a bit during lockdown, and it was busier than I have ever seen it. But it's still sort of have survived in sort of vaguely intact. And, almost tripped there. And over my own laces, which is always embarrassing.
Hang on, I'm ready to catch.
Yeah, thanks. But yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful part of the world. And it's one of those places that people often go to Yorkshire, or they often go to Scotland, or they often go to the Lake District, but they miss out Northumberland. And like I say, the secret's just been getting out over the last couple of years. It just has the most wonderful coastline. Everything up from Newcastle up all the way up to Berwick is pretty gorgeous in its own way, but particularly the top half of that.
Did you ever go to Beadnell?
Yeah, loads, yeah.
Now, the reason I mentioned Beadnell is because the late great Tom Stoddart took me when we went to do a piece about him.
Yeah.
He took me to Beadnell because that's where he started.
Is that right?
His photographic career. A man from the newspapers, as they used to say in those days, came up to Beadnell, which was quite a thing for a small fishing village to have somebody from, I think it was the Mirror.
Right.
I might be wrong with that. Come up and take pictures of this sort of the life of fishing that was dramatically changing, and people changing jobs and losing jobs.
Yeah.
And he saw this photographer making these pictures, I think with a speed graphic or something, and he was absolutely glued to this, and that was his start.
Wow. Yeah, well, that Beadnell hasn't changed very much. It's actually, out of all of the places on the northeast coast, it's the one where the prices seem to be, apart from Bamburgh, sort of skyrocketing fastest, because it's got a lovely bay and, and I think the council's allowed a bit of building around there in a way that it hasn't elsewhere on the Northumbrian coast. But yeah, all of that stretch, Alnmouth, Dunstanburgh, Craster, Beadnell, Sea Houses, Bamburgh, heading north to Holy Island, and then above there is, it's just wonderful wild territory, and love spending time there.
Going back to your Instamatic, by the way, I had a little memory. I went to the V&A Museum a good few months ago now, and they had a cabinet there with all these old cameras, and I was stood before it saying, my mum had that, and Dad had that, and I used to have an old Zenit. I think there was a Zenit in there. Yeah. But they had an Instamatic in there. They're actually worth quite a bit of money. Have you still got your original Instamatic?
No, I don't. I keep everything. Yeah. I've got all of the pictures from it, but I think it might have been smashed to smithereens at some point. So very sadly, no, don't have that anymore.
But you do still have one of those original pictures you made of in Northumberland of Bamburgh Castle, don't you?
I do, and quite a few of Dunstanburgh, and plenty around there, and Stag Rocks around there. It's all sort of. We used to go there a lot as a family, and particularly around Easter and Whit, sort of May Bank holiday, that kind of time, in sort of those kind of terry toweling parkas, sitting on the beach, hunkering down.
Terry toweling what?
Parkas, do you know the ones? Yeah, hoodies, essentially.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Do you remember those?
Yeah.
And just getting rained on. Brutal weather kind of passing through. But I kind of... it goes with the territory there, sitting on the beach getting wet. Yeah. It's just part of the joy. So all good fun.
You have a dog, do you?
You do.
Are you on the Bill Ward workshop? You've forgotten your camera. You've forgotten your camera. Should we go left? Yeah. At any stage, by the way, where you feel it appropriate to don a camera.
Yeah.
Hang on, Bill's found. Have you got these sort of trousers that are resilient to bramble or something?
No, they'll get
Hang on a moment. I don't think the family's falling. You've brought half the forest with you there.
I have. It's good.
Hang on.
It's good here. There we go.
Right. Oh, this is off the beaten track. You have seen Blair Witch, haven't you?
Bye-bye.
See you later. We'll send you our what 3 words. This is where this is how it all started, Bill. Yeah. It really did. The next thing it'll be nightfall and somebody's going to be knocking bricks together.
Yeah, it's good here, isn't it? It's funny. Autumn seems to have just arrived, and it's. I kind of think it seems to be getting later and later autumn. I mean, and obviously it is. It's been unseasonably warm this last couple of years, isn't it? But because I always used to think, certainly in Northumberland, you'd get autumn, you'd probably get peak autumn last week in October, first week
Last week in October?
Yeah, first week in November. It's sort of around that neck of the woods. And
it's just turning here,
yeah,
really,
and it's
isn't it?
only just starting, really.
Yeah.
So for me, kind of here, I'm kind of really enjoying just the bare trunks of the trees. And just the different shades of the colours here, and the different textures on the colours here, and the little vines going up and down, and also the sort of thinning out on the tops a little bit, which gives this is a nice little clearing here, so it gives some light kind of coming in and gives you something to work with in a kind of creative photography way. So for me, this is pretty decent territory, really. It's a lot of fun, and got some nice colour coming off the leaves, and it's that juxtaposed with some of the smoother tree trunks. Really, is the thing that photography is all about noticing, isn't it? And I guess that's the first thing you notice in this little bit. Those little against the dark green holly bush there, you've got. Sort of 4 or 5 in a row, little quite thin tree trunks there, which is sort of juxtaposed really nicely with the holly bush and the little red berries on it, and also some just little golden leaves next to it. So that sort of, for me, would be a place to start if we were going to take some pictures here. That would be a place to start and see what we got.
Are you a tripod man? When you find your place, do you mark your territory with a tripod? Nobody steps here but Bill Ward, kind of...
Get off my land.
Get off my land, yeah.
I gather is a thing on your show. No, not my thing. Not in the woods.
Okay.
I'm very much handheld in the woods, and I like to move quite quickly. Actually, I like to sort of go with whatever catches your eye, and it's a funny dynamic, the whole photography thing, isn't it? A tension between, or hopefully not too much tension, but between sort of slowing down, but also sort of noticing what you notice and then doing something about it. And then in someone like this, there's plenty of things to notice, and there's plenty of things to sort of to focus on. So what I would generally do is you'd sort of spend a bit of time here just noticing what you notice, and then sort of working through and sort of letting each subject lead you with just depending on what you kind of get after you've just spent a few minutes with it. And so in that kind of way, here I probably wouldn't use a tripod because I like to stay sort of fluid if I possibly can. But if I was at the sea and I was doing seascapes, or if I was then I might well have a tripod out for longer exposures and those kind of things. But here there's enough light around with sort of mid-morning. There's enough light to shoot handheld, and I would always try and shoot handheld because you're just going to trip up and it's going to get in the way. Do you know, for me anyway, just for me. And then I'd use sort of lenses wise, just often in the woods I would be using something reasonably sort of mid to long range, really. So I'd probably start here, if I was doing intentional camera movement, I would start here with something like a 24-90, or 24-70, or the equivalent sort of mid-range lens. That's what I've got on my camera here.
Always zooms?
Yes, usually zooms, because it gives you they tend to be small and light in certainly the ones that I use, certainly for intentional camera movement, and it keeps your options wide and open. And if you're doing this kind of a thing, and particularly if it's a place that you haven't been before, I have been here before, but you're never quite sure what you're going to meet, what you're going to bump into. So in that kind of case, I kind of like to have as many options in the bag as possible. And also for intentional camera movement, you can use zooms, you can use sort of the zoom mechanism on it, in terms of both using the zoom. You can't see this, obviously, we're on the radio, but
so I always like to believe they can see out the other side.
That's right, of course.
It depends how well you are at painting a picture.
That's right, yeah. Using the power of your imagination.
Yes,
that's right. But what I'm doing is just very slowly and lightly using the zoom in and out, like you might in a zoom burst, but not in a kind of front to back kind of way. Just using it to kind of soften softly kind of just blur the edges of things, and also moving the camera sometimes at the same time. And you can get some quite nice effects in the wood doing that. And actually, I've done a series of photographs on the Clifton Suspension Bridge, which is in my hometown where we live now in Bristol, the kind of the iconic kind of structure of Bristol. I've done sort of various projects there where I've sort of used kind of very long exposure ICM, so I mean, well, relatively long, sort of 8 or 9 seconds, just to soften the edges of things. And I've used sort of various kind of zoom kind of movements to do that there.
No, I do get a nosebleed with too much tech.
Yes.
Is
that too much?
No, not at all. As my other listener will know. But I do have to ask, in terms of kit, neutral density filters, shutting down the light so you can get your long exposures on those beaches. What do you have in your? If it was a hashtag Be Like Bill moment to keep our sponsor of the show MPB happy. If you want to be hashtag Be Like Bill, then what is in this magic bag?
Well, and full disclosure, I'm an ambassador for Pentax, and I have been since 2013, 2014, something like that. So I use their full frame camera, which is the Pentax K1 II.
Which is the one you're holding?
It is, indeed. And I've just got an old film lens on this, which is the FA 2490, which is battered around. I've dropped it, smashed it, done all sorts of nasty things to it, but it still seems to be working very nicely. And I use this because it's small and light, but in terms of bang for buck, in terms of picture quality, it was one of the last kind of medium range zooms that they made for film cameras back in the day, sort of, I don't know when it would be, but 90s, something like that. And it's really travelled well. Yeah. And it works well. I kind of like it because it's small, it's light, but it still packs a punch. And also with intentional camera movement, you're just not looking for nosebleed sharpness. You're just not looking for it. So in that kind of a way, and also you're not looking for f2.8 usually. And so this is whatever it is, f3.5 or f4, and which is plenty for me, because exactly as you say, what I'm looking to do is stop the lens down probably to f22 or somewhere around there. I'm looking to get the ISO down, and I'm looking to get the shutter speed down. So with this, I'm looking, if I may put on a polarizer in a minute if I haven't got enough neutral density on here. There's nothing on it at the moment, but my first kind of port of call for ICM is I'd probably, a good place to start if you've never tried this before, is to aim for somewhere around half a second and beyond. Some is a good starting point. You may not finish there, but if you're looking for blur, anything below, a 20th of a second will give you some kind of blur depending on the movement that you choose. Anything that's moving, you might not, even if you're sort of looking at birds or horses or, anything like that, cars or something, anything around an 80th of a second, even 100th of a second I've done sort of ICM at. But generally speaking, if you've got a static subject, if you aim for around half a second, if you're looking to start with this kind of stuff, then it's a good place to start. And then you may go south of that in a kind of end up at sort of 2, 3, 4 seconds, or you may go north of it and end up at sort of, I don't know, an eighth, a fifth of a second, but it's a good place to start.
And you're not waving this thing around like Obi-Wan Kenobi with a lightsaber. It sounds like these are very gentle movements. And I don't know why I didn't consider this, the intentional camera movement. Look at me, this is just how much of a nosebleed tech can give me. But I didn't consider, because I haven't really attempted ICM apart from waving my camera around, that actually zoom is your friend too.
Yeah. I might wave my camera around quite a bit, actually. And I might start...
I might video that.
It might be quite entertaining. There's a bit of a dance that goes with this thing.
Is there?
Yeah, there is a bit.
We're in the woods and I'm doing a dance with Bill Ward. This is turning into a very strange day. I'm so pleased it's 11 o'clock in the morning and not later on the evening where I find out that we're actually going to be doing this in the dark.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've got to be very careful. But yeah, no, I kind of... I mean, with trees, the obvious place to start, and ICM with trees, if you're looking to start ICM, is a good place to start. And particularly trees, and these are some very useful ones, are trees with very few branches on sticking out the sides. Because with one or two kind of quite swift up and downy movements up the trunks, you can get some quite pleasing shapes and textures. But having said that, that's a great place to start, and you can make some very beautiful pictures. But you can also do some quite interesting stuff by taking some of the textures from the leaves at the top and the colours at the top.
So looking at the canopy.
Yes, right. Yes, looking at the canopy and the leaves in the canopy. Maybe taking some of the textures of those and then bringing those down into the trunks. And sometimes what I'll do is kind of in-camera multiple exposure ICMs, where you'll start with some layers of the trunks, but also superimpose them over maybe some canopy textures or some sort of, we're on a day where there's not many distinct clouds, but there was a bit of blue sky up there and some cloud sort of patterns or different cloud kind of textures and colours, sort of light greys, dark greys, blue sky, that kind of a thing. I might take a bit of that. You're essentially using the camera a bit like a paintbrush, and you're kind of taking a bit of that in and then mixing it in with some of this. I mean, we can certainly have a go and see how this works. It's going to be a bit hit and miss, but then kind of ICM is a bit hit and miss.
And was that it? Were you waving around there?
Yeah.
That was almost like stealth.
Stealth.
You didn't even know I was doing that.
So just taking in a bit and then taking a bit of the sky and then coming down, and
it's very refreshing actually to hear somebody say that you can still paint something in terms of. I mean, I look at this sky here, and a phrase that I've given it, which is really not very technical at all of late, is blur. But you're still quite excited by this blur sky.
Yes, because what you can do with it is, because it's a kind of sort of whitey, greyy wash.
Yes. Blur,
exactly. The technical term for this colour sky is blur. But you can take it and you can sort of use it to paint in to the rest of your subject. And I am definitely interested in these trees over there and to what might happen there. And I think we might head there in a second. But you can use some of that and try and paint it in with, and you can do that with humans. I've done it often, sort of quite drizzly grey weather, and can give you wonderful ICM results, because it kind of ends up with quite a misty, ethereal feel as a wash to your picture, and it helps soften some of the edges on it. It helps take out some of the high contrast dynamics, and I like it as a kind of as a way of, just blurring the edges, just taking the edge off. The ICM has a bit of a reputation of being sort of massive, super colourful, punch you in the face, knock you out colour sort of overload. And I tend these days not to head in that direction. I'm interested in making slightly more stripped back versions of it and using some of that colour palette up there, which is the blur, and
I don't think you're going to be using this on your workshop anytime soon, are you? No.
You never know. You never say never. And taking a bit of it and then sort of mixing it in with the trunks, because you just might get, and I might try it and it might be absolutely disastrous, but I've had the idea. And so always with ICM, I kind of say, if you've had the idea, have a go. There's absolutely nothing to lose. And all you have is an SD card and your time, and it's not going to cost you any money at all. Back in the 80s and 90s, when Freeman Patterson was doing this in Canada with a film camera, it was an extraordinary achievement, because he was having to wait days, weeks in between doing what he did with ICM and then seeing the finished result with a developed film. Whereas now, on the back of a camera, you get instant feedback over what you're doing, and it simply doesn't matter. The ones that work simply don't matter. In many ways, they help guide you to the ones that will work. So in that kind of a way, sort of, if you've had an idea, I just generally start with the first idea that I have, and that is always a good jumping off point. And then as you see something develop on the back of your camera, that gives you other ideas as to where to go next.
Well, let's wend our way, and I'm going to turn the microphone off for a moment because you're taking me right through the bush here. Let's wend our way into this clearing that's over there.
Do you think this one? Or
let's go. Should we?
Yeah.
With that, I don't know. I'm pointing in a sort of direction that looks like we might be able to get there. Ansel Adams, of course, famously. I'm not sure if he did. Did he trademark? Oh, hang on. Bill's off like a machine. Trademark the zonal system. I might see if I can stick a little TM on blur. See, I can see whole books in it. I really can. Bill's found his position. I'm just going to fall into the shot.
Yeah, very elegant. Yeah.
Yeah, here we go.
So I'm just going off the bottom of the tree trunks, and I'm trying to avoid getting any sort of streaks of light into the background.
Yeah.
Some people like them. I tend, to my taste, one of the joys of ICM, one of the joys of photography, it's all about taste, isn't it?
Yeah.
And particularly with ICM and multiple exposures, you kind of develop your taste over time, and it's one of those kind of genres where there just isn't any substitute for practice, and it's only by practicing and only by sort of finding out the kind of pictures that you like to make that you kind of work out what your taste is. And it's sort of taken me a while to do that as it kind of does. That's quite interesting. There's a sort of
Have a little look.
yeah. There's it's dark, and I'll pull that up exposure wise. It's in Lightroom. Afterwards, I'm sort of.
Do you always photograph in a underexposed fashion so that you've got more choice?
Yeah, I'd love to say yes. Actually, no. That's because I'm just starting somewhere and seeing what happens.
Okay.
And
That's honest.
Yeah. And actually, what I probably need to do is what I can tell from that exposure is that there's something in there that is of interest for me. What I'm interested in here is that trunk versus this colour in the background. So you've got a pale bluish because of the light trunk in the foreground, and a darker trunk in the background surrounded by sort of orangey kind of foliage, and I kind of like the juxtaposition between the two. So if I was going to sort of spend more time here, there's something here that is working less well for me, which is to do with a trunk on the bottom right, which is sort of quite a jagged edge. So if I was kind of going to do something with this, I'd be just zeroing in slightly more on the tree trunk itself, and trying to frame out more the trunks on the bottom right.
I noticed there's a kind of free-flowing procedures, far too technical for it sounds a bit too clinical, but the way that you're using your camera is it's not through the eyepiece, it's not necessarily even looking at the screen on the back, it's just this sort of free-flowing of your hand, and it's almost, I'm hesitating to say it, but it is like a dance.
Yeah, it is. And I've got a project at the moment that I've been doing over the last sort of 6 to 9 months, which is in the water. And it's literally immersive. That's the project.
You're in the water?
Yeah, and photographing the water around you as it comes in, and I kind of love that, because you are literally dancing with the waves as they come in, and every different wave has a rhythm to it. And I'm an ex-surfer, lapsed surfer, hopefully not an ex-surfer, but you know,
you're never an ex-surfer, are you? I heard that from a skateboarder who said, "You're never an ex-skateboarder. You're a skateboarder." You just don't happen to be doing it when you're 76.
That's right. And
not that you're 76.
No, exactly. I mean, yet. And if I make 76, I'll be delighted. We've got young kids, and we haven't been sort of able to do the amount of surfing as once one did when I was younger. But having sort of spent quite a lot of time surfing, I love the rhythm of the water, and there is a beauty in the waves as they come in, and there is a rhythm to each wave when it comes in, and each wave is always slightly different. It's like theme and variations. And so as the waves come in, if you're kind of in there, I've been in the summer in sort of wetsuits and that kind of a thing, and in the winter, because I'm, as previously discussed, I'm not much of a wild swimmer. I haven't been in my wetsuit yet, but I've got the gear. I will do it at some point. And but I do like sort of taking each wave as it comes and trying to make something of it. And one of the things I love about ICM is we talk a lot in photography, don't we, or in terms of taking photographs, or many landscape photographers talk in terms of making photographs. And what I love about ICM and multiple exposures in particular, it really is making, because you're taking something, you're starting with something that exists, and then you're making something that hitherto until this moment doesn't exist. And so I kind of find it quite positive as a genre of photography, because you're genuinely making something. And what I love about particularly in the water actually, is that when you're in the water making a photograph with the waves as they come in, there's a part of you, literally a part of you in every photograph that you make. And depending on what you do and how you react to the waves as they come in, you'll end up with a completely different response based on what the wave is doing. It will change what you do physically. And so much of my day job is based on that, where what you do in acting, we talk a lot about listen and respond. And so you listen to whatever the other person is saying to you and you respond. And improvisation is based entirely on that. But in the theatre, if you're doing a long-running show and often actors will give you something slightly different on any given evening, and if you just give them back what they're the response that you've sort of done over and over and over again, you use the same words but you listen very clearly to their intention and their intonation, and then you respond accordingly. And that's what keeps I've done long running shows up to a year, and that's what keeps a show fresh, is you're just listening very clearly and very carefully to whatever the other person is saying to you and how they're saying it, and then you're responding. And for me, photography is absolutely about that thing, is listening very carefully to whatever Mother Nature happens to be saying on any given day at any given time and responding accordingly. And ICM is a really pure version of that for me.
It's interesting, this language, almost new language of photography, where we've replaced taking with making. We've become more aware of words like that. I got a new computer over the weekend. My other listener will be well aware of just how much of a situation I've felt myself to be in over the last few days. It's the most stressful it's been for a while. That's because I'm one of those idiots that keeps things on the desktop that says, I must back that up at some stage. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on from that, because I can feel myself breaking down already. But the language of making, I've been, with this new machine, so there is relevance to this. With this new machine, I've been teaching it to use the expressions that I now use. You see, for example, when I write making, I wrote an email the other day to somebody, I was talking about making a photograph. And instantly I got the little squiggly underline thing, and Grammarly pulled me up to say, no, it's taking. So I'm sort of retraining my machine to be more mindful.
Good and great. And but I do, this is an interesting point, and it's an important one, is that much of photography's language, and you've just touched on it, is so acquisitive in a really unusual way, in kind of get, grab, take, shoot.
Capture.
Yeah. I'm going to take this out, I'm going to stick it in my car. It's really, I find it really unusual. And so I just think it sort of emotionally, it makes much more sense to me to use language of making and language of receiving, because that's all we're doing as human beings, and as we've all found out, I suspect, over the last sort of 2 or 3 years, Mother Nature is a pretty extraordinary thing, and we as humans are essentially kind of on the receiving end of it and living symbiotically, hopefully, with it. And if we don't, we're going to be in real trouble. But I do feel that from a landscape photography kind of a point of view, is to spend time with Mother Nature, see what she's doing, listen and respond. And it's quite legitimate. And there are many landscape photographers who work like this, who do brilliant work to have an idea, to pre-visualize, to go and hopefully get something that they've thought of and wait and hope that Mother Nature is going to play ball. But my photography absolutely isn't based around that idea. Mine is very much around sort of turning up somewhere and seeing what happens, improvising it and slightly making it up as I go along, and I kind of like that.
That's the actor in you, isn't it? Somebody the other day said to me, Bill, that COVID had been Mother Nature's way of saying you've reached your overdraft limit.
Yeah, and you've maxed it out. You've totally maxed it out.
Come and see the manager.
It's a great way of thinking of it. Yeah,
how attached are you? Attached might be not the right expression, but with regard to being in nature. For example, there are some photographers, and Simon Baxter comes to mind with his wonderful woodland work. I'm not sure if you're aware of Simon.
I know the
Simon's
name,
work.
I haven't seen his work.
I know you'd love it. I know you two would get on like a woods on fire.
Yes, exactly.
That's entirely inappropriate. but he has become very, I'd say he's become emotionally involved, attached to the mycelium story. Or, he would be able to look at, I've been walking doing this program for nearly 2 years now. And honestly, if we looked around, I'd call every tree that's slightly white a silver birch.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said holly, because that's the only one that I recognise.
Yeah.
Is it important to you? I mean, as you look around you now, would you be able to give me a lesson in woodland?
I was terrified you were going to ask me this question.
Well, no, you don't. But you don't have to, you see.
Yeah, no, you can kind of take it on its own terms.
Yeah.
But interestingly, it's interesting. It's a really good question. I've just got myself a woodland app to identify trees.
Which one?
It's the Woodland Trust one. And I was rather hoping that what I would be able to do was to photograph a tree, and then it would just tell me what it was.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't work like that. So what you do is it asks you questions about. It has a big database of all of the names of the trees. So you can either go through and search by name of tree and say what does that tree look like ash or whatever, or you can look at a leaf and kind of goes, is it pointy or is it round? And then you do a kind of process of elimination. And so I've been doing that, funnily enough, been doing that here over the last week, trying to work out and educate myself on the trees. And what I found is there are a number of different kind of varieties of tree here. There's a lot of beech trees, which are the ones over here that's just going a rather gorgeous colour.
You're doing it. You are.
So I know a little bit, but it's one of those things where I do spend quite a lot of time in woodland. And one of my best friends actually went to Agric College and can just point at stuff and just tell you.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing. And it's one of those things that I've started. Same with clouds. I've often wondered, apart from cumulonimbus, what they're called.
Oh, I'm quite good at that.
Are you quite good at that?
Stratus and
cirrus and all of that.
Cirrus, I can do a bit of that.
Can you? Yeah. You see, I love all of that.
And blur.
Yeah, no, obviously. That's right.
I'm just forwarding that one to the CAA now.
Yes, you
so
should.
that they can feed that to pilots, so that they can feed in with their meteorological reports. We've got a bit of blur coming out of Bristol Airport today.
What's that book? The Cloud Spotter's Handbook. Right. Is it Gavin Preter-Pinney? Can't remember what it's called. But it's a brilliant book, and it is nominally about clouds, but it's about much more than that. It's cloud spotting, I think, or cloud watching. It's a brilliant book. And it's just about, it's about. I won't say any more. But if you have an interest in clouds, it's a wonderful book to read.
Yeah. Let's. Let's.
I haven't made any.
Well, no, you have. You've been making pictures, and I'm hoping you might share some of them with us for the show page. Shall we move a bit further through the forest?
Yes.
I don't believe we've lost enough yet.
I'm just gonna. Yeah, that's. Well, yeah, that's quite interesting. The top of the canopy here is quite interesting, and I'm just doing a sort of. There's so many different kind of movements that you can do with.
I promise, by the way, for the extra milers, I will do a little bit of video of Bill at work doing this, because it's genuinely interesting to see you.
Yeah.
Because I've never seen somebody. I love your ICM work, and I'm not just saying that because I'm stood next to you. I genuinely. We're in a forest, and you know the way out.
Yes.
But I genuinely do. I really do. Think that your ICM work is superb. It's wonderful, and to actually watch you do it. It's a bit like but it's a bit like when you go to watch a painter that you admire. And I've seen a few in my life, and you've thought, oh, is that how you do it?
Yeah, a lot of it is hit and miss, and if you are interested in ICM, Doug Chinnery, who I've always been a massive fan of his work, he's the reason why I do ICM.
Right.
Essentially,
okay.
I came across an interview that he gave to On Landscape, the online photography magazine, and I came across his work in about 2011 or 2012, I think, and I'd never seen anything quite like it. And I also loved how he spoke about it, and he's such an erudite man, and so I've been sort of practicing it, I suppose, ever since. So about the last 10 years, about a decade or so, and he's always been very clear. If you get about 5 out of 100, you're doing well.
Wow.
And what I love about that is that without the other 95, you wouldn't get the 5. And do you know what I mean? And so in the theatre, we sort of spend a lot of time, particularly if it's television. Actually, these days you almost never rehearse it. You turn up and you shoot and then you move on. But in the theatre, you spend a lot of time rehearsing stuff. You have a play usually which is written before you start. Occasionally you'll improvise it and with a dramaturg, but usually you've got a play that's written before you start rehearsals, and you work through it. And at the end of every day, there'll have been been things that have worked and things that haven't, but the things that have worked are informed by the things that haven't. And ICM absolutely works like that, and so I often talk about it as being a kind of as a voyage to an unknown destination, which is you start with something, you start with what's in front of you, and then you see if you can make something of it. And every time something doesn't work, you're one step closer, it seems to me, to something that might work, because it's kind of hypothesis testing. And if you try various things that to your taste aren't quite what you're looking for, then you can use that as a springboard to stuff that is what you're looking for, if you see what I mean.
Do you ever get people, as I watch you work, do you ever get people that sort of pass you by and think, what? I just remember years ago when I was first studying photography, and it was out of Newbury College. It was a wonderful course. I had a fantastic year, really did, and it opened my eyes quite literally to many things. But I remember one day being told to go and, or one week, our assignment was to go and make reflection pictures. So I toddled into the park with my Nikon F5 and started making my reflections. And there's a bandstand in the park in the middle of Newbury, and there was a great big puddle there, and it showed the bandstand majestically. And I thought, well, that's fantastic. And there was I down on my knees trying to get this picture of this puddle, and this guy just cycled past, and I'll hold the microphone away from me because he literally shouted, "It's a puddle, mate!" as he cycled past. But I was mortified. I wasn't in my teens.
No,
I was in my 30s. But even then, it was like, oh, and it
dagger through the heart.
For a while, it was, I don't want to take pictures or make pictures because I felt a little bit self-conscious.
Yeah.
Do you ever get funny comments when you're waving your camera around in the fashion that you are at the moment, where people think, what's he doing? And they give you a great big wide berth in the forest.
Yeah. I had some people on Dunstanburgh Beach about when was about a year ago, who wondered if I might be conducting a survey, surveying the land with some kind of surveying instrument, sort of waving it around somehow, and was quite surprised when I wasn't. And generally on the beach,
you should have done. You should have said, "I'm looking for ectoplasm. This is a really haunted beach." Have you not seen them?
Yeah, I should have. And and sometimes in the sort of on the beach, people just look at you like you're a bit mad, and that's okay. And I mean, one of the joys of my profession is that I am used to standing up in a public place and doing something ridiculous. Often, dancing in spandex with fruit on my head. I've done that for 6 months in Spamalot.
But never mind what you do at home. What do you do on the stage?
Yes, exactly. What do you do? Thank you.
Into Wednesday.
Yeah. But one of the advantages actually of being an actor in this kind of regard is that I'm not too worried about what I look like. No. Because do you know what I mean? That just goes with my territory on a daily basis.
Right, let's go find another place to photograph.
Great. Very good.
I'm going to wander around you, or rather fool around you. Hold on.
Great. I think this might.
Oh, look at that.
It's quite nice, isn't it?
Oh, no, it's more than quite nice. That's hang on my wall nice.
Well, that's very kind of you. I might send it to you.
Yeah. How much? Will you sign it?
Yeah.
It'll be on eBay by 6.
Yeah. 50p's worth. Yeah, very good.
Well, as you've no doubt gathered today, we're spending time with Bill making pictures, many of which are ICM compositions. Since 2012, Bill's been a vocal advocate and practitioner of ICM, intentional camera movement, the process of deliberately moving the camera whilst taking a picture, and in-camera multiple exposures, which he finds particularly revealing of the essence of any meeting between a person and wherever they happen to be. He's a fundamental believer not just in the beauty but also the wonder of planet Earth, and the privilege we all have of spending the limited time we have on it and with it. His photography allows him to retreat from the day job, as he calls it. And one of those day jobs was, one of the biggest soap franchises in the world, Coronation Street. In 2003, Bill joined the cast of Corrie, as it's affectionately known, playing a character that was to reward him with nearly 400 episodes of gainful acting employment, playing the part of Charlie Stubbs.
How was I meant to know which of the stupid stuff coming out of your mouth was true? I didn't know he was coming. I didn't plan it. When you walked through the door, Charlie, I just thought it might be funny, funny if you thought that
Well,
he
I
was...
can't hear you laughing, so come on. If you think it's funny.
Stop it, Charlie.
Let's hear you laugh. So what do you think I'd do? Let you bring some bloke back into this house under my roof, which I busted got to pay for?
Well, you've brought people back here.
Yeah, one too many. You.
During his time at the programme, the character played by Bill, Charlie, gradually became the show's main antagonist. He was narcissistic, manipulative and mean, described as the soap's vilest villain. Spoiler alert, though you've had many years to work this out, Bill, as Charlie, was eventually written out, and the episode which featured the character's murder was listed as the second most watched for any programme on TV in the year of broadcast, having been watched by 13.1 million viewers. Despite the character's dark side, though, Bill looks back at his time on the show with much affection.
I'll forever be grateful to
It's a worldwide franchise.
Yeah, and they took it. It's on. It's certainly sort of it is on the telly in New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and various places in Europe. But they took a big chance on me because I really hadn't done very much telly at all, and I was very much learning on the job, and I loved it. I love soap because there is an immediacy to it. You have to stand and deliver, and much in the same way that I love theatre for its rehearsal process, where you work on something and it's intricate and you try things, and if they don't work it's okay because you can come back tomorrow. On telly you can't do that. If you're making Coronation Street, you've got anywhere between 10 and 15 scenes you're going to be filming that day, up to sort of 30 or 4 pages of dialogue. Now 30 or 40 pages of dialogue, and now you might not be in all of those scenes, but you might be in some of them, and there are some days when you are in all of them. Not very often, that incidentally, but just occasionally, where it's a pretty busy day. So you've got 40 minutes to shoot a scene from the moment you walk in the door to the moment you walk out, and you have to do it. So it's kind of instant problem solving, and I love that about it. There is an immediacy to it. In drama school we used to talk a lot about you have to get out of the way of yourself, and that's also useful in terms of photography, I think. Getting out of the way. Yes, you have to park all of that stuff, and it's just you and the sound guys, the camera operators, the director and the other actors, and between you together in 40 minutes you need to make some television, and the schedule is so packed that there is no coming back tomorrow. You have to do it, and you have to do it now. So if there's problems you have to solve them, and I love that. There is a sort of, and often you're filming completely out of order. I think the biggest jump I ever had was about 20 episodes, going from one scene and then to an episode 20 episodes previous to that. So it's kind of it's quite unusual. As a genre, it's very much its own beast. It's very unlike anything else you will ever film, but wonderful in its own way. And I had a brilliant time on it, and I feel very lucky to have been in both. I've done EastEnders as well, but only as a small part for a couple of episodes.
Did you have to really London that up?
I was the man from the brewery. I can't remember.
Who wants their lager?
Brilliant. You see, you should have got the job. Yeah, you should have done it.
No, we have on a Saturday. We have Sweeney Saturday in our house, where you have to talk. Who was the actor? Ray
Dennis
Winston.
Waterman.
No, well, I was thinking of the new movie, Ray Winston.
Okay.
You have to be Ray Winston for a day in our family on a Saturday. You should come round.
But
It's a really strange day.
I think a great job. I can imagine. But Ray Winston's amazing. I remember watching him in Scum, which was his breakthrough film back in. It was set in a sort of young person's correction centre, or Borsal as they were called back then, and it was an extraordinary piece of acting. He was violent, but it was also very moving. And I remember when he did that, and he's one of those guys that I've kept my eye on his career all the way up since then, just because it was such an extraordinary piece of acting.
If you can hear the hissing in the background, by the way, we're at this waterfall that you promised us at the start. Can I just ask one more question before we walk a little bit more forward and go and find some pictures of this? The character that you played in Coronation Street wasn't exactly the kind of character you'd take home to your mum. He wasn't the nicest. I know it's an old question, and everybody would have. You must have been asked this by Bella, I'm sure. But is it more fun playing the bad character?
It is a really interesting question. Often, yes.
Because he wasn't just bad. He was
foul. But he was fascinating. And from an acting point of view, he was magnificent, because he was an abusive man.
Yes.
And he was abusive,
vile.
yeah, and violent.
Yeah.
And abusive to pretty much anyone who came in his way. He was abusive to men. He was specifically and particularly abusive to women, and specifically and particularly to women with whom he was in a relationship. And he took people apart. And there was the most abusive relationship he had, although he had a few, was with Shelley Unwin, who was who brilliantly, beautifully played by Sally Lindsay. Just a beautiful piece of work. And he made it very clear early on in their relationship that he was capable of extreme violence. He pulled the earrings out from her ears one night, and then he never ever had to do anything like that again, because that threat was always ever present. And then he just dismantled her, piece by piece, bit by bit, over the course of a year, and ended up marrying her. And the writers wrote a really brilliant story about her sort of calling off the wedding at the altar, and it absolutely served him right. And but he was a fascinating character because the writers really wrote for him, and they really researched their subject matter, and I researched it too. And I did a lot of work with Women's Aid, for whom I'm still an ambassador, and they really helped me get inside the head of what you would call a perpetrator, I suppose, of domestic violence. Because what was really interesting about him was that he was a violent man, but he wasn't just violent. He was more interested in control, and that was the step change that really interested me in the character, and that was the essential building block. And once I'd got that clear, then everything else came off a desire to control not just himself actually, but also all of the other people who came into his orbit. But what was really interesting about it was that he wasn't just foul. He was very clever. He was very funny, and he was quite a rounded character in a lot of ways. And from an acting point of view, there was always something to play, and I loved him because he was one of those guys that when you got the script, you were never quite sure what he would be up to next, but you knew it would have substance and it would be of interest from an acting point of view. So he was magnificent, but I played him for 3.5 years in 400 plus episodes, and that's a long time living with a man like that. And you kind of go, and I kind of hit the point where you kind of go, I just don't want to play him any longer. And he was brilliant and wonderful. And
did you request to be written out?
I did.
Right.
I did. I sort of, and I was rather secretly hoping, if I'm honest, that they would write a good, an exciting out story for him, and they did. And he was murdered by his girlfriend Tracy Barlow whilst receiving a lap dance, and it was
yes, I remember that scene. Yeah.
And it was just a wonderful piece of writing.
It was the drama.
It was just great fun, and it was funny, but it was dark, and so I kind of
difficult to get that mix, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Coronation Street has always done that kind of thing really well in my experience, and they'll mix a very dark story with, at the time, someone like Scylla, who was a kind of quite a larger than life character played by my good friend Wendy Peters, who's amazing, and he's sort of having a bath in a jacuzzi with their dog, and so they would juxtapose those two things together, and I kind of loved that about Corrie at the time, and they still do it, I'm sure. So but from my point of view, from an acting point of view, it was an absolutely magnificent job, and I loved it.
In no way am I comparing him with the character I'm about to mention, the real person actually, but I've just finished watching Netflix's Dharma. Very dark, seriously dark, and I didn't expect, first of all, to want to watch it through. I kind of pressed play because somebody said you should watch it, the acting is amazing, and forgive me for not knowing the actor's name, but it seems almost that I've believed him as Dharma, that I don't need to know his name. But I do wonder how that gets, because he played it so brilliantly. It's such a vicious, horrible, nasty man, Dharma, and he played it chillingly well. But I wonder, when you're playing somebody who is so violent, so heinous, so nasty, so dramatically bad. Sorry. But my serious question is, How does that mentally affect you when you leave the set?
Well, you have to know that it is someone else. And what is interesting about soaps is that when you're in heavy storyline, and I was with him for the last year, we did a lot of episodes over his last year as he was sort of getting together with Tracy Barlow, who is also, if you don't know Coronation Street, she's back in the show and is also a very complicated and at times unpleasant individual, played by my very good friend Kate Ford, who is wonderful and lovely. But when you are doing those kind of jobs, you are spending more time being that person than you are being you. And that is a very, very unusual set of circumstances. If you're doing a film or if you're doing a play, that is almost never the case. If you're doing a play, you'll be rehearsing for 4 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever, and then you'll be doing the show, and you'll only be doing it for a couple of hours in the evening, and then the rest of the time you're being yourself. If you're doing a film, that might last for a couple of months, maybe 3 months, maybe 4 months if it's a large piece of work, maybe 6 months. But that's it. And some actors will go into character, some method actors will go into character and stay into character for that long, but then they can be themselves again. And with soap, you're inside of this character for a long time. And also, like I say, if you're filming 5-6 days a week, and I was filming 6 days a week quite a lot of the last year, then you're spending more time being that character than you are being yourself. Not only that, when you leave work and you're walking down the street, and Coronation Street films in Manchester, and the people of Manchester love the show, and it's one of the reasons why it has been as successful as it has, because it's still true to the roots of Manchester and the people who live there. It's very accurate. But the people of Manchester love the show, and so when you're walking around the streets, they will call you by your character's name. So it's a very unusual set of circumstances.
Did some people used to cross the road from you? I wonder how the great unwashed, i.e. me, used to treat you as somebody who was...
Nine times out of 10, they just want to say hello.
Okay.
And 9 times out of 10, they just want to... They're often really complimentary and just want to say that they've really enjoyed the show and they really love the show and they like the job that you're doing and that kind of thing. Occasionally, I might get a bit of trouble. Occasionally, and you've just got to be slightly... your wits about you and just be able to spot that happening. But most of the time it was absolutely fine. And one of the reasons why I'm a photographer is because of that time. And if you do what I do for a living, which is professionally pretend to be someone else, and the reason why I do photography is to remind myself of who I am. And that's why my photography is utterly personal, because it's the yin-yang to my day job. And so if you spend as much time as I do pretending to be someone else, then it really brings you back to who you are. And also for me, spending time with Mother Nature is a big part of it. And because it's utterly balancing. I spend a lot of time in sort of enclosed sets with no windows, in theatres with no windows, in places where you've got an awful lot of other people, very high energy, very high octane, creative, bright, wonderful, energetic people. But I can't live life at just 100 miles an hour. There's a part of me that's quite reflective as a human being, and so I need the time just to get away into nature and hang out with Mother Nature and spend time with Mother Nature, just kind of rebalancing and reminding myself of who I am, essentially.
That makes perfect sense. Shall we go find this waterfall? Because this is one of the reasons we've walked this way. Let me just try something on you. Come on, you lot, time to go home. Whatever, EastEnders, perhaps?
Possibly.
I did the face. I'm a bit Ray Winston, I'm afraid. There's not much else to my acting.
You've missed the goal.
I definitely haven't, Bill.
But there's still time.
Yes, maybe not. Let's go find somewhere to photograph. You'll find pictures on today's corresponding show page that show the waterfall in ICM style, and a reminder that if you want to send your pictures in for future editions along with your letters about what you feel about photography, what it does for you, if, like Bill, it's a way to recharge, to escape the noise, to find quiet, or the many other reasons you may have for lifting that eyepiece to your eye,
then I'd love to receive them. Send to stories@photowalk.show. stories@photowalk.show. And if you can resize your pictures to 2000 pixels wide, that will be much appreciated. Let's return to my guest today, Bill Ward, for our special Walking Together in woods close to Bristol, UK. And if you want to know where, remember those what 3 words from the app: belong, reap, ambushed. I was just looking at the back of Bill's camera and looking at the... Well, you called it the... Funnily enough, this goes back, doesn't it, to art and photography being such a subjective thing by its very nature, that you were saying, I see energy, and I was saying, I just see structure and texture.
Yeah, and you see what you see.
No one's more right than the other.
Yeah, exactly. It's also personal, and that's why, two photographers go to the same spot. They'll come away with entirely different photographs, because that's the joy of it. I love it for the broad churchness of it, and we all see. Everyone has their own obvious. Yeah. And everyone has their own starting point, and also when you're looking at pictures, as you say, everyone sees something slightly different. So I'll compose a picture for a certain reason, and you'll see something completely different in it. And I love that about photography is that we all bring our own sort of individual viewpoints to it.
Can I just return to your acting? Well, and photography, the two of them together, although you very much see yourself as somebody... Well, you're doing both. You're doing acting. Well, let's just get through this narrow path through the holly here. You see yourself very much as an actor and a photographer, of course. I would say that I'm primarily a photographer, although I feel with the podcasting that I'm kind of transitioning. Life is very cyclic, and I love that about life. Transitioning back into radio in many respects. I still think of this as radio. Yeah. And or wireless, as my dad would have called it. But with you, I remember my transition from broadcasting to photography, feeling, and I still do to a great extent, like a visitor. and we suffer. Oh, hang on, we've got this. Yeah, here's the log of doom. Yeah. I feel I should press pause at this point, but what the hell? Let's just go for it. I used the stepping stone. Yeah. I'm going to watch. Oh, Bill's done it too. I almost got the camera then. Thought that was going to be another moment. But this thing about imposter syndrome. Yeah. It's something I know you talk a lot about. What's your feelings about it?
It's ever present in both photography and acting, and I suspect it's probably ever present in any creative endeavour. Anything that doesn't require a specific and clear qualification, anything that is not absolute, anything that is taste based. And I suspect it's certainly in acting. I don't know an actor who doesn't, to some extent, hasn't thought about being an imposter at some point. Yeah. It's sometimes all the time, sometimes just because you can be an actor just by calling yourself an actor. You can. Yeah. And there is a training, and I've done a lot of it, but that still doesn't necessarily mean, that you're qualified for anything, So in that kind of a way, there is always a part of you that has a bit of imposter syndrome in you. But also to a certain extent, I kind of quite like that, because there is no absolute kind of measure of taste is...
I'll let you get your breath back.
We're walking up a hill.
When we did the Kieran programme, he said at the start, I love the programme, but I did sound very out of breath at the start.
I'm not surprised.
So I'm now aware that I'm route marching you up a hill.
Yeah, up
Sorry,
the hill.
imposter syndrome.
No, that's fine. Yeah, and so I kind of think anything that doesn't have an empirical sort of bar or qualification that you have to get over, if you see what I mean. You're always going to feel a bit of that.
Yeah.
But I do think in a lot of ways it's useful having that, working with uncertainty, having a level of uncertainty, I think, and humility, I think is useful, because I think it helps you to be open to other people's ideas, because there is no one way to photograph anything.
No.
There is no one way to act. There are kind of actors of all different shapes and sizes and all abilities and all sorts of things. And so in that kind of a way, I think it's a useful thing to have, because it in lots of ways, I think it keeps you grounded, probably.
Yeah.
And it stops you kind of thinking that you and only you have the answers.
I feel a sense of doom. I was going to use the word doom. Maybe I should keep the first one that comes into my mind if I'm photographing an event for a photographer. I get this idea, oh, they're looking at me, oh, no. If you were to step onto stage with, he may not be your favourite actor, but with, I don't know, Sir Anthony Hopkins comes to mind.
Yeah.
How would you feel?
Well, I mean, total legend, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, extraordinary man. I've watched him for... it's a really good question, that. And I remember walking into the Coronation Street Green Room on my very first day of filming, suddenly looking around it, kind of going, oh my God, all the legends, all the legends. And that I'm on telly, and it is very difficult. I've never been on stage with Sir Anthony Hopkins. I hope that day comes at some point, because he's extraordinary. But there would definitely be a part of you, kind of, it'd certainly be a part of me, kind of going, God, I'm not sure I'm good enough to share a stage with him. He's remarkable. But like I say, sort of acting is a very broad church, and in that kind of a way, you are on stage often with very famous people, and everyone is making, at the end of the day, it's never about you. Yeah. It's only ever about the story that you're telling, and the people to whom you are telling it. As long as you can put your mind on that, telling the story, just tell the story. The director I've just worked with, we were working on a new musical called Are You As Nervous As I Am, which is a brilliant title. And the director on that, Phoebe Barron, said to us on our very first night, just tell the story. Just tell the story. And it's a brilliant thing to say, because actors will get hung up on, all of the other stuff, entrances, exits, have I brought on the right prop, if I'm moving a table, have I moved it to the right place, all of that stuff, and am I going to remember to do everything in the right order, all of that. But actually, if you tell the story, then that's sort of 95, 98, 99% of the job done.
How on earth? I've been watching Strictly. I wasn't really a Strictly fan, actually, to start with, but my wife Sam, she loves it.
Yeah.
And we're a Strictly family.
Yes.
And actually, Strictly being on a Saturday, that mixing with Sweeney Saturday is sometimes quite strange bed partners.
Yeah, I can imagine.
However, I am in awe of anybody that goes on that show and remembers the routines.
Dance steps.
But it does feed back to a question I've got for you about, because you said you can just go in and do a show. And from a very early age, I went to a school production in junior school and forgot my lines.
Yeah.
I've never, since that day, been able to, here I am talking myself out of it, being able to remember lines. And I remember being given, in my broadcasting career, a job one day, which was for it's a certification thing. When they put certificate, it was for Blockbuster Video. Do you remember Blockbuster Video?
I do.
And it was a training video for their staff. And the script was given to me in the morning, and I had to deliver it by 11.
Right.
I was crestfallen.
Yeah.
And awful. That was it for me. Auto cue was my friend after that.
Yeah,
How on earth do you remember the lines that you have to for what you've done in your career? And so quickly.
Yeah, well, in a soap, actually, you get longer than you might imagine. So you get about 10 days in the soap, generally. So you'll get the script sent out about 10 days in advance. And if it's good writing, and if it's writing with dialogue, the kind of stuff that A, other people would say, and B, specifically your character would say, then it's pretty easy to learn after a while. Because your brain is just like any other muscle in your body. if you work it out, it gets better and more efficient at doing the job it's meant to do. And so in that kind of a way, it was one of the things I was worried about when I started soap, actually, is am I going to be able to, because I'd come straight from theatre where you get 4 weeks to learn everything, and I was definitely worried, am I going to be able to remember enough of it and fast enough? But you get it has its own rhythm, and you get into it and you learn what you need to learn for as long as you need to know it, and then you park it and you move on to so in that kind of a way it's more doable than you might imagine. I've done Look Back in Anger, Jimmy Porter in Look Back in Anger, John Osborne's famous play, which is it's 3 hours of Jimmy Porter ranting, and the changes of thought are extraordinary, and in that kind of a way, and that's tricky.
Should we shelter here from the rain?
Yeah. In that kind of a way, that's kind of night after night, sort of coming up with that stuff and motivating it. It can be hard work during a very long tour, but in terms of the specifics of learning lines, we always taught at drama school, and I think it's right, if you forget a line during rehearsal, it's almost certainly because you haven't got a reason to say it. So what we're often doing from a professional point of view is finding the reasons behind everything we say. So from a character point of view, you're looking for reasons. Stanislavski trained, sort of Russian theatre auteur, director, writer, remarkable man. But there's a very specific sort of theatrical training that he devised, and which a lot of drama schools, certainly when I was training, kind of followed. And what you're thinking about is objectives. Why is my character here? What is he trying to do to the other person in the room? All of those kind of things. So you're thinking of reasons and tactics behind everything that you say. And so in that kind of a way, there's always thoughts attached to the lines and the words, and if you get the thought right, the line almost always follows. And so in that kind of a way, if you sort of build a character from the bottom up, where there are reasons for everything that they say, and you're given the words that they say, then everything kind of makes sense. Certainly for a play. The interesting thing comes actually with something like the scripts for soap, where they're written in real time. So when you have a character, you've got a rough backstory, but it's often only half a page of who they are and where they're from. That's what I had for Charlie Stubbs when I started in Coronation Street. And then and so you have to manufacture, there's nothing written on the page, you have to manufacture all of the reasons why he might say what he might say. And then, because it's being written in real time, the writers might actually write a whole backstory for him, which turns up in an episode that utterly contradicts everything you've ever imagined about your character.
So you're almost fighting with the writers, say, no, I will weave this back round to how I believe you should have written it.
Well, and you just kind of try and make it work. You try and obviously you have to say the words that you have to say always. But in that kind of way, so you just have to incorporate the new background into your character. So it's an unusual way of working, because generally any sort of theatre job or any television or film job that you ever do, the story has a beginning, a middle and an end. It's finite. With soap, you're only ever living in the present. So your character only exists in the present. The past to a certain extent is unknown. Often they'll bring a wife from way back, or a mother you never knew you had, that kind of stuff. And the future is unknown. So in terms of, and what we were talking about earlier, in terms of visceral thrill of performance, they're absolutely it, because everything, you have a very short amount of time to film, and you're often sort of making up on the spot, or certainly since you first got the script 10 days ago, reasons why you're saying everything. And that in itself is a creative process, an energetic one. Rainy day, on a rainy day, on a rainy day, on a rainy day, on a rainy day,
Let's take a left turn at the traffic lights, or stage right, as you would say.
Yes.
Pentax.
Yes.
How did that association come about?
Oh, that's a really good question. I had been, I'd worked at their advertising agency, Saatchi & Saatchi.
Yeah.
So I'd always owned Pentax cameras. It wasn't the first DSLR I had. It was the first DSLR I had, not the first SLR. I had a Praktika MTL 5B back in the day. Do you know those ones?
I do.
Yeah, just marvellous cameras, built like tanks.
Tell me you've still got it.
I have got it.
Good.
Yeah. No, they're amazing things. And because I worked at Saatchi's I was working there as a planner, strategic planner, we got Pentax gear at sort of cost price. So I sort of got myself a film SLR and a couple of lenses, and I really liked it. And I'd never had a Pentax camera up until that point. This is about 1998, 99. And then when they were late into the DSLR market, weirdly enough, as I understand it, they were one of the first to build a digital SLR prototype, but never followed through to production. And so when they launched, they were about certainly 3 or 4 years, possibly 4 or 5, behind your Canons and Nikons, and so in that kind of way. But I was using film cameras then, and the early technology, I wasn't quite sure that if it was up to film camera standard actually, and I don't think it was in the early days. And then when it hit a point where DSLR's resolution was up there with film cameras, I sort of made the jump across to, I think I had a Pentax IST DS, which is one of the first ones that they made. So I think it's something like 6 megapixels, maybe 6 or 7 megapixels. And then ever since then, I've not sort of gone up every sort of iteration. I miss out 2 or 3 generally. But I was, from about sort of 2011, 2012 onwards, I was starting to exhibit as a photographer. And because I'd always used Pentax cameras, I started getting in touch with them whenever I was doing an exhibition and saying, just in case you're interested, I'm a Pentax user and I've got an exhibition here if you ever wanted to come and have a look, and all of that kind of stuff. And I started sending them pictures. And then in sort of 2014, one of their PR company at the time just sent me an email out the blue and just said, we're looking to sort of create some ambassadors for the UK. Would you be interested in being part of the programme? And I went, yes, I'd love to be, yes.
Where do I sign?
Yes, exactly. Do you have a camera? And, do you have some cameras and lenses you could possibly send me? And which is great. Yeah. So in that kind of way, so I've been with them since 2014, and I'm a self-confessed fanboy. I love their stuff, just because it's really rugged. And also, I'm from the northeast. I've got a thing about the underdog. Do you know what I mean? I quite like the fact that they're not super fashionable, and I quite like the fact that not everyone's got one, because they're good and they really do the job. And there are things that I know we haven't done it today, but there are things that you can do on multiple exposures in a Pentax camera that you can't do on any other. And they have a very high frame rate. They can go up to 1,999 exposures, blend those into one frame in the back of the camera.
Good Lord.
Which is, in most other manufacturers, go up to 10 and that's it.
Yeah.
So in that kind of a way, I've always sort of felt it's useful for what I do.
Yeah.
But also, all of their stuff has been weather sealed since, whatever it is, 2011, 2012. All of their camera bodies, most of the high-end ones anyway, magnesium alloy. Their lenses have always been good, and they're backwards compatible. I'm really sounding like a fanboy here, but they're backwards compatible with kind
His
of...
eyes have glazed
Yes,
over.
I know, so have yours. And from like 40 years ago with film cameras, and you've seen me using a 1990s film lens, and so I love that about them. And for me, they're all very ergonomic. They work very well. They they're heavyweight, strong camera bodies, and the lenses are weather sealed. They've had shake reduction in the camera bodies for 10 years. All of which the mirrorless cameras are just getting now. So I've kind of felt for a long time that they've been on lots of dimensions, not on all dimensions obviously, but on lots of dimensions ahead of the game, but without the marketing spend.
I like that idea of supporting the underdog.
Yeah, I kind of and
it's quite poetic.
Yeah, and suits me as an individual.
Yeah,
and I kind of and you will find that the people who use Pentax cameras are quite evangelical about them.
Are they?
And I also quite like the fact that they don't make 5 new cameras a year, and I'm sure it's probably because they can't afford to, but also by the same sort of the ones they do make are really good and are always or hitherto certainly in my experience a step change upgrade on the preceding model. So in that kind of a way, it's worth a new camera.
Charlie Waite.
Yes.
Now, we've had Charlie on the show. We were supposed to, I was supposed to go and take a walk with Charlie, and it was just at the tail end of the sort of second COVID wave, where I think people were still being a little bit cautious for good reason, I'm sure. And in the end, we ended up doing a Zoom, and I really am looking forward to walking with Charlie at some stage. But you and Charlie have got a bit of an association, haven't you?
Well, he's an actor. He was an actor.
Of course, yes.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
And so he came to photography via acting. A slightly different route, I think, to me.
Yeah.
Via portraits and then landscapes and then, and to become, pretty much one of the forefront UK landscape photographers of his generation. Really amazing stuff.
And he picked one of your images. There was a commendation, wasn't there? That must have felt a particularly good feeling, I would have thought.
Yeah, it's interesting that, and we were talking about imposter syndrome earlier. Yeah. And one of the things, I've sort of entered Landscape Photographer of the Year since about 2011 or 2012. I remember sort of getting my first commendation in 2013, and it is sort of validation to some kind of that other people, and we were talking about the only person that is important in your photography is you, but there is always somewhere at the back of your brain kind of going, I wonder if these are any good actually. I might like them, but I wonder if everyone else thinks they're rubbish. And so in that kind of a way, I've always sort of enjoyed entering competitions like that, particularly Landscape Photographer of the Year, for two reasons. One is you get a sense of how peers may view some of your photographs. But also, I kind of like it as a way of taking stock over a year and sort of going through what I happen to, have made or kind of come across over the year. And just, it's an interesting and reflective period where you kind of go, and you often remind yourself of stuff that you've just had on the hard drive and kind of go, actually, I've never really had a look at that. And so in that kind of a way, I find it quite useful as a process, really, to sort of force yourself to take stock a little and see what you have done over the last year and have a think about it. So I enjoy it for that. And then, I've been lucky enough to have done sort of not bad in that competition over the years. I think the thing you were referring to would be the Adobe Prize, which was for a photograph that I did of a waterfall in the North Yorkshire Dales around Mooka and Keld called Kisden Force, which is a beautiful fall. But that was an interesting photograph in its own right because of what we've been talking about earlier in time and the importance of time. And it was that whole thing. I'd been sort of walking. I'd done a big circular walk, well, not a big one, but 7 or 8 miles, sort of earlier that day. And it was just starting. The light was starting to go, and I had quite a long drive to. I was doing Emmerdale at the time, and I was filming the next day, and a quite long drive back to my digs in Leeds. And the light was just starting to go, and I was just kind of thinking, I wonder, should I just get in the car and then I saw the sign for the falls, and I kind of went, well, I haven't been here before. I might not be back for a while. Let's go and just have a look. And I saw these waterfalls, and they're not sort of massive vertical ones. They're sort of horizontal and with a few drops in. I found myself standing next to one, and it was that thing where you kind of go, I was mesmerised by it. And you know intuitively there's something really interesting going on here, but it takes your brain a while to tune into what it is. And it's only by sort of spending a bit of time and hanging out with wherever it is that you happen to be that you start to give yourself time and your brain to work out what actually might be going on that pleases you. What I noticed was that there were a couple of standing waves, both of which appeared to be connected, but they weren't. One was firing at a slightly different time to the other one. They were directly beneath each other, but they weren't causing each other to go. And then I noticed also about once every 30 seconds or so, they would both go at the same time. And when that happened, there was this beautiful circular picture of energy kind of starting round where they were and going round in this kind of elliptical way. And there were lots of different colours. There was all sorts of reflections. There was a blue sky reflection on the bottom right, there was a tree reflection middle left, there was yellow stone, and when the brown water came over the yellow stone, it was almost like the water going over it was backlit, and so it turned up crimson. And so you had all of these very unusual colours, and it was almost only and specifically because there'd been a very heavy rainfall the previous day that had kicked lots of very red soil into the water, so it was unusually red, and the falls were unusually full. And so it's just one of those. It's so often in a set of photographs, the last one you take is the one you remember. It's so weird that, isn't it? How often that's the case.
And also, if you ever ask yourself the question, should I go down there? The answer is invariably yes.
Yes, and Mark Littlejohn is fascinating on this subject. You only regret the photographs you never took. Yeah. And it's really true. Yeah. And he's a wonderful speaker. I mean, a brilliant landscape photographer, but a wonderful speaker about photography too, and a wonderfully inventive brain. But that's so true, and so whenever I have an urge to take a photograph now, I always try and make sure that I do, because then even if it doesn't kind of come out as you would wish or as you thought it might or whatever, you're not left with the what ifs. You're not left with that kind of thing nagging away at the back of your brain. I wonder what would have happened if. So at least you're hypothesis testing, you cross it off and you move on.
Shall we move forward a bit? Well, the rain, it was torrential just a moment ago, but it's laid off a bit now. There was a passing mention of COVID a moment ago, and I think I'm being able now to sort of navigate my way out of mentioning the C word in most interviews now. There was a period where I would always have the stock question, how has COVID been for you? I'm so pleased not to have to tread that path too much these days. But there was a project that you made which I think has a sort of importance in terms of theatres being in danger during that period. And that's what the project was actually called, wasn't it?
It was, Theatres in Danger. And it came from when COVID hit in March, March 2020, was it? The theatres started shutting.
Yes.
And I was touring a play at the time, and we were with a wonderful theatre company, Out of Joint, who've renamed themselves Stockroom and just make wonderful work. And I wanted to work with them for 20 years pretty much, and we were touring a beautiful piece of work called the Glee Club, and we got pulled sort of about within an hour of the Prime Minister made a speech on March the 16th, I think it was, which was about asking people not to go to theatres. Stay indoors. And you kind of go, and all of a sudden you kind of go, oh my goodness, that means everything shuts. And it was just in the run up to lockdown and all of that, and lockdown hadn't been sort of specifically talked about by that point, but the theatres one by one were shutting, and it became very clear very fast that unless something happened, there would be about somewhere around, there was a calculation done, by November around 70% of our theatres would have gone out of business and would have shut. And because the way, I don't want to make any kind of political points here, but one of the facts of austerity over the last 10 years is that theatres in general have received less and less and less funding, and so from the state, and so what their funding models have become more and more and more predicated on audiences and audience returns. So if you lock theatres up and you shut the doors, you shut audiences out of them, and so you automatically shut their funding stream. So in that kind of a way, closing theatres was an existential threat to the entire theatre fabric of the country, really. And that became very clear very quickly. So when I've been doing my day job, I've taken photographs of pretty much every theatre that I've worked in since 2009, when I started.
Empty theatres.
Empty theatres. And I do it because, for a similar way that I get back to nature, really, is that I love these buildings. So many of them, not just the old ones, incidentally, but so many of them have so much history in them. And, I've got a history degree and I have an interest in that anyway. But so many of them are such beautiful spaces, and with an energy in from all of the audiences who've been through them, the technical staff that have been through them, the actors who've trodden the boards. They just have a latent energy, and there is a thrill of being in a dark and empty theatre, of potential energy of the performances that have not only been but are to come. And so I've always taken photographs of the theatres that I've worked in, and partly because there's a respite to the rehearsal process or the performance process, I like to spend time in in these buildings when there's no one else in them.
Do you?
Yeah. And so I'll go into work early, or I'll go in on a Saturday morning and sort of 2
And
hours.
sit in the theatre?
Yeah, and sit in the theatre.
And look at the stage?
Yeah.
Wow.
And take photographs of it and just spend time with it and see what occurs to me with it. And so I've done that as a project for 10 or 12 years now, but I'd never shown the photographs.
Oh, it wasn't a COVID thing necessarily?
No, I'd done that for 12 years, and I'd never ever.
I'd read that completely incorrectly.
But it's really.
I'd added my own narrative to that.
That's all right. But I'd never shown the photographs, and so what happened was, as soon as the theatres started shutting, and there were 4 that shut pretty much immediately and went out of business, I started posting my theatrical pictures or pictures that I'd taken in theatres to Instagram, and I'd never done it before, and I'd never been sure what to do with these pictures, and all of a sudden I had a reason to make them public. And a good friend of mine, Matty Graham, who's a photojournalist and a very good one, got in touch with me. He'd made a Pentax, a film for Pentax of me as a photographer, and he's from my neck of the woods. He's from Newcastle upon Tyne, and we've always kept in touch. And we really hit it off. And he got in touch with me, and after I'd posted a few, and he kind of said to me, that's a really good idea what you're doing, and I think there's a book in it. There's a book idea in that. And I went, don't be ridiculous. I've never made a book. I wouldn't know where to start. I'm just. And he said, well, I do know how to make a book, and I'll help you do it if you like. And then so we sort of thought about it for a bit, and I kind of decided at that point that we should make it into a charity project, because theatres, it was before the Cultural Recovery Fund happened, and theatres were in real trouble. And so in that kind of a way, I kind of thought, right, well, whatever, even if in my own small way I can make a tiny little contribution, but it partly raised some money for it, and all the proceeds of the project have gone to the Theatres Trust. So I had to pay for the printing, and I covered the printing off the first few books, and then after that every single penny from it has gone to the Theatres Trust. And the Theatres Trust are the theatrical charity who very quietly behind the scenes help theatres stay afloat. And help them manage difficulty, and have helped many theatres around the country not only survive the pandemic, but manage their way out of it. And also, given the subject matter of the photographs, which were about the theatres themselves as opposed to the performers in them, it seemed the obvious kind of beneficiary of the project. So Matty helped design it and designed the book. I sort of wrote some words for it, and we chose the pictures and put it all together, got it printed, and we're sort of halfway through the second print run now. The first print run sold out in about 8 weeks.
Amazing,
and it's been great fun. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the process of it, because we're so lucky in this country having as many theatres as we do, and as I say, not just the old beautiful ones, but we do the Matcham theatres. Matcham was a theatre designer, late Victorian period, early Edwardian. Many of his theatres are still standing, but quite a few in the 50s and 60s were getting torn down and turned into car parks and shopping centres. These are beautiful places and wonderful acoustics, and we're very, very, very lucky to still have them. But also we're very lucky to have, there are new theatres being built in London now, and sort of purpose-built spaces, modern technology in the round, a lot of them kind of all sorts of interesting things that you can do with the stages and the audiences and audience seating plans and all of that, sort of very flexible spaces. And I love those spaces every bit as much as I love the old ones, just because of the potential energy involved in them.
Is it true that they would leave a light on always in a theatre when it was closed?
It's certainly true
on the stage.
It's certainly true of some of them, and
just one single bare bulb, I think, lighting up the stage.
Yeah, that's certainly true in some of them. And there was a photographer during lockdown whose name I can't remember, and again, a huge apologies on my front, who did a project on that.
Oh, that might be where I saw it.
Which was beautiful. It was a beautiful project. Beautiful project. Great idea. But that certainly happens in a couple of theatres, not in, as far as I know, not in every theatre, but certainly in a couple of theatres that definitely does happen.
And is it also true that during the pandemic you decided, well, I'll do what I can do, and you went and drove vans?
I did, as most of the people in my industry did, because we couldn't do what we were doing for a living, and theatre was shut down, television was shut down, theatre was shut down for the best part of a year and a half, and it still isn't quite right. Audiences are certainly, audiences in London are okay, but around the country, not every theatre is as full as it would like to be. I was touring a theatre job earlier this year, which was for 6 months, and I would say our audiences were around a third to a half what I would have expected pre-pandemic. But yeah, absolutely I did. And funnily enough, on that job, I'd been driving vans for Tesco's, the stage manager had been driving vans for Sainsbury's, the production manager had been driving vans for Asda, the lighting designer had been working in a supermarket, our company manager had been working in a flower boxing factory. So we all did whatever we needed to do to earn a living and to get through to the other side. But I was lucky in that the pandemic started in March, and television started back up again. The government underwrote it in a way underwrote the insurance for it in a way they never did for theatre, and so television started back up again in August and September, and I got a television job around August and September, and then I was very lucky to have worked my way as an actor through the pandemic. I've done quite a lot of television. I did Before We Die and Vera and an episode of Casualty, and just been filming in the summer the Hunt for Raoul Moat, which was
Wow, that's heavy.
Was quite heavy, but it's kind of a story told from the side of it was, and that all happened in my neck of the woods up in Northumberland. So that's left a very sort of big, heavy sort of memory, certainly on the people of Northumberland and the people of Rothbury, where it all took place.
The Shakespearean phrase for start, middle, and end is that you've got to have. What is it? There's the three parts.
Oh, I don't know.
What's it called? We have to have. I know what it is. Setup, conflict, resolution. That's it.
Yeah.
Start, middle, end.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have a start, middle, end. Let's see how we go with this. We started this. We're back at the car park, you see.
Yes,
so
here we are.
We're at the last act, as it were.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have another. What 3 words? Start, middle, end. See? Don't just throw this thing together.
Yeah, very good.
So here's my what 3 words. Photography or acting?
Both.
No, you've got to have one.
Can't.
Really?
Both. Yes. And I love them for the more acting I do, the more photography I do. And they balance each other out perfectly. Yin yang. And there is a side of me that loves making stories and working on a stage and working with a company of actors. I love the energy of that. I love it. And I love the unexpected nature of a rehearsal period. I love starting with nothing and finishing 3.5 weeks later with a fully all singing, all dancing show. I love that. There is also a side of me that is reflective and needs peace and quiet and solitude. And photography absolutely provides that for me in abundance. And so for me to have a balance between those two things, I feel terribly lucky. And the longer I can keep both of those things running, the better for me.
And my thanks to Bill Ward for walking with us this week. You and I, that is, with our cameras on the Photowalk. Just ahead of our play-out song, let me thank Lynn Fraser, one of our wonderful and most esteemed extra-milers, for our conversations about Bill's work that we had. It's your suggestions, Lynn, that help me understand who you'd like to hear of and about on the show. And, of course, you can send me your suggestions too, as Lynn did. But before I go further, let me share this. I was editing the show yesterday afternoon when it occurred to me that I'd met with Bill before. I kind of knew it as we walked, but I thought, no. Obviously, I know Bill's face because I've watched him on the telly, but there was something about him. I think his eyes, actually, when we were walking and watching him again in Corrie for research, that I just couldn't seem to shake this feeling we'd met before. And then, as I say, yesterday afternoon, it clicked. A good friend of mine, Andy Thompson, is a filmmaker working in the lower budget scene, one of his genres being horror, which he does very, very well. And he'd asked me 7, possibly 8 years ago to do some set photography for a film called Not Alone. Pictures of the characters, that sort of thing. And one of the characters was Frank, played by Bill Ward.
I wish I'd never had a daughter like you.
Never give up on you, Frank.
You got the devil inside you.
Only tell me what happened that night.
Oh, see, deep in those woods, there was I talking about Blair Witch, when all the time I could have been seeing Bill in character in Not Alone, which later became The Haunting of Ellie Rose. Right. You can come out from behind the sofa now, but what a small world. I knew we'd met before. If I can find them, and I'm saying this before I've properly looked, I'll put some of those film stills that I shot on the show page today. I have a wonderful guest next week whose name and why he's on I'll share after the play-out, but it's very good timing. I think we've had more than enough wonderful quotes for a PS today from Bill, to be honest. But just ahead of our play-out song, which I think fits the idea of calm and indeed ICM, in the middle of the forest, very well indeed, is from Narrow Skies, a song called Season of Gold. I've found a postscript to the show, which I want to share from Destin Sparks, a landscape photographer, who said, "Photography is the story I fail to put into words."
We walked that season of gold. I'd walk it again with you. Clouded moments, hazy pictures in my mind. I've seen this moment before. Can I go there again with you? Reminisce of where time stands still.
Season of Gold from Narrow Skies. Wonderful. Music today from artlist.io. Now, for our patrons, or extra milers as we call them these days, this Sunday, a show called Why Can't Everything Just Work? I know you're going to recognise some of the moments described. You can join the supporters by going to the website photowalk.show and clicking the Support the Show button. Next Friday, my guest is Derek Catani, who, with the World Cup starting at the weekend, was there as a photographer when England won the '66 final. I know. We do have listeners from our Grand Isle who wince at the 1966 thing. There are more nations than just England under this Union flag, of course. And I know there are some people who just don't like the round ball at all. But this is a human story from a photographer who's seen everything from, well, sharing an office next to the famous England manager at the time, Alf Ramsey, to being in the wrong place at the wrong time when football hooliganism was most prevalent in the UK. So whether you like football or soccer or not, I promise you a show full of story. Derek Catani next week. Finally, fist bumps go to Neil Ford, head of Stuff I Don't Understand, Emily Renier for your eyes in our Facebook group, and Andrea Gilpin, Chief of Staff on Instagram, Vero and The Ideas Floor. And I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.